Lucas Mason's mind was racing as he sprinted down the narrow hallway of his office building, his shoes tapping sharply against the polished floor. The boardroom door was just ahead, and the weight of the presentation he was about to give pressed heavily on his chest. He was running late again. It was almost as if time had no respect for him, constantly slipping through his fingers like sand. It was always the same: meetings, deadlines, emails, and there was never enough time to stop and just breathe. His work was his life, and if he lost it, he had nothing. "Lucas, you're late," his assistant's voice cracked through his thoughts just as he reached the door. He nodded absent-mindedly, offering her a quick smile. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. The meeting room was filled with the usual suspects, their eyes glued to their laptops, barely acknowledging his arrival. Lucas was their leader. Everyone knew that, but it felt like no one really saw him anymore. No one really saw anyone. As he launched into his presentation, Lucas couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing, something deep within him. But he didn't have time for it now. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the figures, the profit margins, and the projections. That was what mattered. Results, numbers, tangible success. He noticed a few glazed-over expressions around the room. Of course, they were all just here for the paycheck, the status. No one cared about the bigger picture. It wasn't about people anymore. Everything was about winning. But what did that even mean anymore? "Lucas, can we move on to the next agenda?" His CFO, James, interrupted, snapping him out of his spiral of thoughts. "Right, of course," Lucas replied, clicking through the slides mechanically. His eyes darted to his watch. Another meeting done. Another few minutes wasted in this cold, sterile world of spreadsheets and corporate jargon. He couldn't help but wonder when things had become so hollow. Just as he was about to wrap up, his phone buzzed. A notification from his daughter Lucy popped up on the screen. "Dad, are you coming to my recital?" The familiar pang of guilt hit him like a punch to the gut. She'd asked him to come to this recital weeks ago, but here he was, drowning in another round of corporate nonsense, pretending like he had everything under control. "Lucas, are you okay?" James asked, snapping Lucas out of his thoughts again. Lucas forced a smile. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just a little distracted," he said, clearing his throat. "Sorry, let's wrap this up." He stood, feeling the weight of his decision, the constant gnawing realization that he was failing as a father, failing as a human being. But this was what he had to do. There was no turning back. Not now. Before we dive into the next part of Lucas's journey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on the next chapter of his transformation. And hey, drop a comment below and let me know. Do you ever feel like Lucas, stuck between ambition and personal life? I want to hear your thoughts. The sound of his phone vibrating again broke the silence of his office as Lucas sat back in his chair. This time, it was a reminder of an upcoming board meeting. He had no choice but to ignore it and return to his grim routine. His mind was too tangled to focus on any more numbers today. He had to make things right with Lucy, maybe tomorrow, but tomorrow never seemed to come. That evening, Lucas found himself at a church service. He didn't know how he ended up there. Maybe it was a fluke, or maybe it was the universe nudging him in a direction he didn't want to go. Either way, he was there, surrounded by people who seemed to genuinely care about something greater than themselves. A stark contrast to the cold efficiency of his world. The service was over, and people were milling around, exchanging pleasantries, when Lucas spotted her. Emma, a little girl, no more than 6 or 7, sitting alone near the food line. She was rubbing her foot, clearly in pain. Lucas, lost in thought and always in a hurry, almost didn't notice her. But then she looked up at him, her big brown eyes locking with his, and in that moment everything stopped. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, her voice full of vulnerability. "Could you help me? My foot hurts. Can you carry me, just for a little while?" For a moment, Lucas froze. He wasn't the type of person to help others. Not like this. Not in a world where time was money and personal connections were a luxury. He hesitated. There were a million reasons why he couldn't stop. He was running late, and there was work to do. His daughter was waiting for him too. But then, as if out of nowhere, something inside him shifted. He remembered Lucy, her smile, her laugh. He could almost hear her calling out to him, asking for his attention. And in that instant, he made a decision. He bent down and picked Emma up, feeling the weight of her small body in his arms. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to slow down. Before we continue with Lucas's journey, if you've been enjoying the story so far, make sure to like and comment below. How do you think Lucas will handle this moment? Will it change him forever? Stay tuned for the next chapter and hit that notification bell to follow his transformation. As Lucas carried Emma through the bustling church, everything around him seemed to blur. The laughter, the chatter, the clinking of plates. It all faded into the background. His mind was no longer filled with work meetings or project deadlines. It was just him and the little girl, who was now resting her head against his shoulder. She smiled up at him, her eyes filled with trust, and he felt an odd tug at his heart. No one had looked at him like that in years, not even Lucy. No one had ever asked him for something so simple, so human, in a long time. It made him realize how much of his life had been spent chasing after achievements that never asked for anything in return. "Thank you, sir," Emma said softly, as Lucas carried her across the crowded room, her voice a stark contrast to the chaotic world around them. "No problem," he mumbled, unsure of how to respond. He didn't know why he was doing this. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him. Maybe it was the pull he still felt toward his daughter. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the fact that for the first time in ages, he was doing something that wasn't about control. It wasn't about power. It was about presence. He made his way through the church's front door and into the cool evening air, where the sun was just beginning to set. The street was quieter than usual, and it felt as though the world had paused, just for a moment, to give him space to breathe. He looked down at Emma, her face serene and calm in his arms. She wasn't heavy, at least not in a way that bothered him, but the weight of the moment was starting to sink in. "Where do you live?" Lucas asked, his voice breaking the silence between them. He realized he didn't even know this little girl's name until now. "Just around the corner," Emma replied, pointing toward a small side street as Lucas followed her direction with his eyes. "My mom's waiting for me." Lucas nodded, trying to process what was happening. Something about Emma's simple request, her vulnerability, felt like a revelation. For years, he had lived in a world where asking for help was a weakness, where everything had to be controlled, calculated. His employees asked questions, but only about numbers. Lucy asked for his time, but he never had any to give her. He took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill his lungs as he reached the door of the modest house Emma pointed to. It was small, with a garden out front that was a little overgrown. It wasn't much, but it felt like home. The moment he stepped inside, he was immediately aware of the difference between this house and his sterile, impersonal apartment. Mom, look who I found!" Emma's voice rang out with the kind of excitement that only children seem to have. A woman came rushing from the small kitchen. Her clothes were simple but well kept, her face warm and welcoming as she looked at Lucas and Emma. "Thank you for helping her," the woman said, her voice full of gratitude. "She's been walking on that foot all afternoon, and I wasn't sure how we'd make it home." Lucas felt a strange discomfort in his chest. It wasn't because the woman had thanked him. It was because he suddenly felt out of place. He didn't belong here. This wasn't the world he was used to. There were no polished suits or luxury cars. There was no faceless company to run. Just two people struggling in a world that demanded much of them but gave little in return. "Yeah, no problem," Lucas replied, shifting Emma in his arms as he smiled awkwardly. He didn't know what else to say. He didn't know how to act in this new world. The woman, noticing his discomfort, gestured for him to sit down. "I'll make you some tea. You look like you could use it." "Thanks," Lucas said quietly, lowering himself onto the small couch. As he settled in, he tried to calm the feeling of unease creeping over him, but it wasn't easy. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a pang of longing, a longing for something real, something that wasn't defined by the numbers on a spreadsheet or the cold exchange of emails. Emma's mother returned with a steaming cup of tea, which she handed to him. "It's not much, but it's warm. Please, take a seat." Lucas stared at the tea for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Everything about this place, the humble home, the warmth of the mother's smile, the simple act of sitting down and sharing a moment of peace, felt so foreign to him. Yet he couldn't help but feel something tugging at him, something that whispered, "This is what you've been missing." "Thanks," Lucas murmured, taking the cup. He raised it to his lips and took a sip, the warmth spreading through his body as he looked around the small living room. It was cluttered but cozy. Pictures lined the walls, family photos, a graduation photo of Emma's mother, a wedding picture of her and her late husband. It was so different from the empty walls of his office, the coldness of his sterile apartment. Emma came over and sat beside him on the couch, her foot propped up on a cushion. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are you a superhero?" she asked, her voice innocent and full of curiosity. Lucas chuckled softly, taken aback by the question. "No, I'm just someone who's trying to figure things out." Emma smiled brightly. "You're nice," she said simply. That was all it took. Her words hit him harder than anything else that day. For the first time in a long while, Lucas felt something real. It was like she had seen him, really seen him, and it was humbling. "Thank you," Lucas said quietly, his throat tightening. "Loving the story so far. Don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment below. Do you think This small moment will change Lucas forever. What would you do if you were in his shoes? Hit subscribe to catch the next part of his journey, where things are about to get even more intense. The tea was gone in minutes. Lucas sat quietly, Emma leaning against him, her foot still propped up. The quiet in the room was a stark contrast to the chaos he had been living in. His mind was still spinning, but this moment, this simplicity, felt like a lifeline. It was so easy to forget what mattered when the world was constantly asking for more. More work, more effort, more power. He'd been so consumed by climbing the ladder that he hadn't even stopped to look at the people around him. Emma's mother smiled at him from across the room, noticing his silence. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind," Lucas chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "I guess that's what happens when you get too focused on the wrong things." She nodded slowly, her expression sympathetic. "I know the feeling. We all get caught up in things sometimes. But it's nice to see someone slow down for once." Not many people would have carried Emma like that. Lucas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I didn't have a choice," he said, almost defensively. "She asked for help and..." He trailed off, unsure of how to explain what had happened. Emma's mother was quiet for a moment, letting the words settle in the air before responding. "It's not about having a choice, Lucas. It's about seeing someone in need and deciding to help even when it's inconvenient." Her words hit him like a punch in the gut. It was exactly what he'd been avoiding his whole life. Human connection. Helping, really helping, wasn't just about doing what was easy or what made sense. It was about showing up for others, no matter how inconvenient it felt. "I'm not sure I know how to do that," Lucas said softly, more to himself than to her. "You're doing it now," she said, her voice warm. "By being here, by taking a moment to just sit down and listen. That's what matters." Lucas stared at his empty cup, lost in thought. This was the first time in as long as he could remember that he hadn't been thinking about what was next. He hadn't been thinking about the next meeting or the next big deal. He hadn't been thinking about how he could get ahead, how to control the situation. Instead, he was just here, and it felt strange. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" he asked, suddenly feeling the weight of his own words. Emma's mother looked at him carefully. "I think we all do, sometimes. It's easy to get lost in the roles we play. But I believe there's always a chance to change, to choose differently. It just takes courage." Lucas felt something stirring in him. Courage. That was what he lacked. Not the courage to make deals or lead a team, but the courage to embrace life's messiness, to be vulnerable, to allow himself to be present with others, not just as an executive or a provider, but as a human being. "I don't know how to be brave anymore," he admitted quietly, almost as if confessing a sin. Emma's mother smiled gently. "Bravery comes in small moments, Lucas, like carrying a little girl across a crowded church, or sitting down and sharing tea with strangers." He thought about that for a moment. She was right. Maybe bravery wasn't about doing something grand or dramatic. Maybe it was about showing up day after day, even when it felt uncomfortable. Maybe it was about choosing kindness, even when it was inconvenient. Lucas looked at Emma, who was still leaning against him, her eyes closed in a peaceful sleep. The gentle rise and fall of her chest made his heart tighten. This was what he had been missing, this quiet, unassuming peace, the kind that didn't require him to be the best, the fastest, the most powerful, the kind that just asked for presence. He realized in that moment that he had spent his life running away from these simple moments. "I've spent so much time chasing after things that don't matter," Lucas murmured, "but I'm not sure what I'm really looking for anymore." Emma's mother reached over, placing a hand on his arm. "Maybe you're looking for the same thing we all are: connection, meaning, a reason to care." For the first time in years, Lucas felt like the walls he had built around himself were starting to crumble. He hadn't realized just how lonely he had become until now, until Emma and her mother had showed him that there was more to life than efficiency and control. The room grew quieter as the evening wore on, and Lucas found himself lost in the simplicity of it all. He wasn't thinking about deadlines anymore, or board meetings, or the next big project. He was just here, and for the first time, it felt okay. As Lucas stood to leave, Emma's mother walked him to the door. "Thank you for everything," she said softly, her eyes sincere. "You didn't have to help, but you did, and that means more than you know." Lucas nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Thank you for reminding me what really matters. If you're still with me, hit that like button." Do you think Lucas is starting to change, or is it just a momentary shift? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the next part of Lucas's journey. It's only going to get deeper from here. Lucas walked out of the small house, his mind still spinning from the conversation with Emma's mother. The cool night air hit him, the sounds of the city far in the distance. But as he stood on the sidewalk, There was a sense of calm he hadn't felt in ages. He wasn't sure where this feeling was coming from, but he could feel it in his chest, a small, quiet shift. It wasn't the relief of finishing a project or landing a big deal. No, this was different. This was real. As he made his way back to his car, his thoughts kept drifting back to his daughter, Lucy. How long had it been since he'd spent real time with her? He had been too busy to even attend her recital. The guilt gnawed at him. She deserved more. She deserved a father who wasn't just physically present but emotionally available. But how could he be that man? He had built his entire life on being busy, on controlling every outcome. Was it even possible to just be with someone, to care without the distractions of work and success? He got into his car and stared at the dashboard for a moment, feeling the weight of the decisions he had made over the years. He had sacrificed so much, so many important relationships, all in the name of professional success. Was it worth it? The drive home was quieter than usual. He didn't even turn on the radio. The silence felt more comfortable than it ever had before. The city lights blurred in the distance, and for the first time in ages, Lucas allowed himself to be present in the moment. No spreadsheets, no deadlines, no expectations, just him, alone with his thoughts. When he reached his apartment, Lucas almost didn't want to go inside. It felt too empty, but he had to. His life was here, after all, the life he had built. The apartment was exactly how he left it, cold, modern, and devoid of warmth. He dropped his keys into the bowl by the door and kicked off his shoes. The walls seemed to close in on him. It was all so sterile. He walked over to the window, gazing out at the city. There was a part of him that still felt the pull of his old life, the rush, the constant pursuit of more. But standing here, looking at the endless sea of lights below, he felt disconnected. He didn't want to be part of that world anymore. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Lucy. "Dad, can we talk?" He stared at the message for a long moment, his fingers hovering over the screen. The guilt intensified. She needed him, but could he really give her the time she deserved? Could he balance everything? Work, family, life, without falling back into his old habits. Without thinking, Lucas hit reply. "I'll be there soon." Feeling hooked? Don't forget to hit like if you're loving the journey so far, and leave a comment about how you think Lucas will handle the conversation with his daughter. It's going to be emotional. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep up with the next chapter. Trust me, it's going to get real. Lucas arrived at his daughter's apartment 20 minutes later. He hadn't realized how tense he was until he stepped out of the car and walked toward the door. Every step felt heavy. He wasn't sure what to expect when he walked in, but one thing was certain. This wasn't just about a recital anymore. There was something bigger lurking beneath the surface, something they had both been avoiding for far too long. He knocked lightly on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. A few seconds later, Lucy opened the door, her expression guarded. She didn't smile, but then again, neither did he. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice a little softer than usual. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," Lucas replied, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry I've been so busy. I know I've been distant." Lucy stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment was cozy, but there was something about the silence in the air that made everything feel more awkward than usual. It wasn't like they had never been here before. It wasn't like they hadn't shared 1,000 moments. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a reckoning. She led him to the couch, and they both sat down, facing each other. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was too much to say, too much unspoken tension between them. "So, what's going on?" Lucas finally asked, his voice sounding more nervous than he intended. Lucy shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know, Dad. I don't know how to talk to you anymore. You're always so busy with work, and when you do have time, it's like you're somewhere else, like you don't even see me anymore." The words stung more than he expected. He had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud hit him in a way he couldn't quite describe. He had always prided himself on being a provider, on giving her everything she needed, but in doing so, he had missed what she truly wanted. His presence. "I'm sorry, Lucy. I've been caught up in everything, and I've failed you. I'm sorry I haven't been there for you the way you need me to be." Her eyes softened slightly, but the hurt was still there. "It's not just about being there physically, Dad. It's about being present. I can't remember the last time you really looked at me and asked how I'm doing, how I feel." Lucas took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his daughter's words settle on him. "I've been so focused on making everything perfect, on trying to get ahead, that I forgot what really matters. I've been chasing success, but I've lost sight of what's truly important." Lucy looked at him, her expression still uncertain. "And what's that?" "You, Lucy," he said quietly, meeting her gaze. "I've spent so much time thinking that success would make everything right, but I see now that it's not enough. I've neglected the one thing that truly matters. You, your happiness, your life, Your needs? I've failed at being the father I should be, and I'm sorry for that. There was a long silence. Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she just looked at him, as though trying to process the weight of his words. Lucas reached out and placed his hand on hers, feeling a mixture of regret and hope. "I'm here now, Lucy," he said softly. "I'm here. And I'm ready to listen. I want to make it right. I don't know how, but I'm going to try." She didn't say anything for a moment, but then she squeezed his hand, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I want to believe you, Dad, but I don't need you to try to fix everything. I just need you to be here, for me, for us." For the first time in a long while, Lucas felt a tear prick at the corner of his eye. The weight of his daughter's words settled in his chest, the truth of it hitting him harder than any failure in business ever had. He had spent so many years building walls around himself, thinking that success was the key to everything, when all along, the key to everything had been right in front of him, his daughter, his family. "I'm here, Lucy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Still with me. If you're feeling the emotions like I am, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Lucas can really change? Or is it too late for him to make things right with Lucy? Subscribe and turn on notifications for the next part. This story is about to take another big turn. The rest of the evening was quiet, more peaceful than Lucas had anticipated. He and Lucy didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. There was a sense of mutual understanding between them now, something they hadn't shared in years. It wasn't fixed overnight, but it was a start. A real, raw, genuine start. As Lucas left Lucy's apartment later that evening, he felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. The guilt, the regret, the constant pressure to be everything he wasn't. It had all seemed to fall away. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was heading in the right direction, like he could breathe. But as he walked back to his car, he felt an unfamiliar mix of emotions, hope and fear, excitement and doubt. Could he really change? Could he actually balance his demanding career with being the father Lucy deserved? Could he be the man he needed to be? The drive home was quieter than usual. His mind wandered back to Emma's family, to the warmth of their home, to their laughter and kindness, to the way Emma had smiled up at him, so full of trust and innocence. He had been so focused on his job for so long that he had forgotten what it meant to truly connect with others. He realized now that his work had never been the problem. The problem was how he used it to shield himself from everything else. He had let it consume him, pushing away the very people who mattered most in his life. And now, for the first time in years, he was ready to change that. Are you feeling Lucas's transformation yet? Let me know in the comments if you think he's on the right path. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to follow the rest of his journey. Trust me, it's only going to get more intense from here. The next morning, Lucas woke up early. For the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't reach for his phone the moment his eyes opened. He didn't check emails, didn't scroll through work updates. Instead, he sat up in bed, staring out the window at the city below. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a race. It felt like a gift. His phone buzzed beside him, breaking the silence. He reached for it without hesitation, glancing at the screen. A text from Lucy. "Thanks for coming last night. I know it's not easy for you, but it means a lot." He smiled, the words bringing a sense of warmth that he hadn't felt in a long time. He typed a quick reply. "I'm proud of you, Lucy. I'll be better. I promise." It wasn't perfect, but it was something, and it was enough for now. After sending the text, Lucas stood up and stretched. His mind was already shifting, already thinking about the changes he needed to make, both at work and in his personal life. He knew it wouldn't be easy and there would be setbacks, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the work. He was ready. By the time he arrived at the office, Lucas felt like a different person. The familiar hum of the corporate building greeted him, but today, it felt less intimidating, less suffocating. He walked into his office, still feeling the weight of his decision to change, but it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like liberation. His assistant greeted him with her usual efficiency, offering him the latest reports. But today, Lucas didn't dive straight into them. He paused, looked at her and smiled. "I need to make a few changes around here," he said, his voice calm but firm. She raised an eyebrow, clearly curious. "What do you mean, sir? I've been too focused on profits, on numbers, and not enough on people. I want to prioritize the well-being of the communities we work in. I want to make decisions that have a positive impact, and I want your help to make that happen." Her eyes widened slightly, but then she nodded. "I'm on board, Lucas. If that's what you want, I'll support it." Lucas smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He knew it wasn't going to be easy to convince the rest of the team, but he was ready for the fight, ready to stand for something more than just financial success. As the day went on, he sat in meetings, but his approach was different. He didn't rush through the conversations. He listened. He asked questions. He made sure to consider the human impact of every decision, not just the bottom line. When the day was over, Lucas felt different. The old rush, the constant urge to push harder was gone. In its place was something new, something slower, something deeper. It was a sense of peace that came with knowing he was making the right choices, not just the profitable ones. That evening after work, Lucas drove to Emma's house again. He wasn't sure why, but he felt like he needed to go, needed to be in that place where things were simple, where kindness wasn't a transaction but a way of life. When Emma opened the door, she smiled brightly, and Lucas felt that familiar warmth settle in his chest. "Lucas, you're back," she exclaimed. "Mum's making dinner." "I know," he replied with a grin. "I thought I'd come by for dinner too, if that's okay." "Of course, come in." He stepped inside, and once again, the quiet hum of their simple life surrounded him. The smell of food cooking in the kitchen, the sound of Emma's voice, excited and bright. It was everything Lucas had been searching for and more. That night, as they ate together, Lucas found himself reflecting on just how far he had come, from the cold, corporate-driven man he had been to the father and leader he was becoming now. It wasn't perfect. He still had work to do, but he was on the right path. When he left their house that evening, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had come into this journey thinking he would change the world, but what he realized was that the world didn't need to change all at once. It needed small moments of connection. It needed presence. It needed kindness. And that was something he could give, not just to his work, but to his family, to his community, to himself. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and for the first time in his life, that was enough. Wow, you made it to the end of Lucas's incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and let me know how you think Lucas's transformation will affect his future. Do you think he'll continue to make the right choices? Leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for watching.